there any pretrial matters to attend to before we proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we make introductions.
You may.
My name is Miranda Rojas, and along with my co-counsel, Keaton Barnes and Ray Vergara, we represent the plaintiff in today's case. Our party representative is Ms. Alex Grace. Your Honor, this time we also have several documents that we'd like to tender to the bench, including Midland's case law, the pretrial orders, complaint, special instructions, and stipulations, as well as the provided counterclaim. May I approach the bench?
Does the defense have any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, you may.
At this time, Your Honor, we would also like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses except for party representative, Ms. Grace on our side. And we would also like to invoke Rule 603, which simply states that the witnesses have all been pre-sworn in.
Any issues with the defense?
No issues with that. Today, the defense party representative is Mr. Danny Kosak.
All right, then those rules will be invoked.
And Your Honor, finally, we would like to ask what your preference is about moving about the well, approaching opposing counsel as well as a witness.
Sure, yeah, we've got plenty of well space, so feel free to make use of it. Just don't get too close to the bench. Ask to approach the bench, and then ask to approach opposing witnesses, but you don't need to ask to approach your own.
Yes. With that, the plaintiff is present and ready to proceed with trial.
All right, anything from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. May we first make introductions?
You may.
I, Easton Bennett, along with my co-counsel, Kate Gaspin,
Good morning, Your Honor.
and Drake Baker, represent the defendant, Danny Kosak, in today's case. We have a couple documents we'd like to tender to the bench, and intend to offer character evidence as well as the answer and counterclaim in today's case. May I approach the tender?
You may. Or sorry, assuming no objections from the plaintiff.
No objection, Your Honor.
And at this time, the defense is ready to proceed.
All right, we'll proceed to opening statements.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Lights, camera, tracking. This is exactly what happened on June 29th of 2017 on the set of Midland Selection Studios. Today we're here because Danny Kosak, an animal trainer, decided to bring a dangerous and poorly trained chimpanzee to the set of Midland Selection Studios. Midland Selection Studios, or MTS, had a very successful night television show called Midland's After Dark with Alex Grace. This was until they agreed on giving Danny Kosak, the animal trainer, the opportunity to bring Elias, his chimpanzee, to the show. However, the chimpanzee was not trained. MTS followed all the guidance they were given. So you will hear from Alex Grace, the host of Midland's After Dark, who will tell you how Danny Kosak contacted her, begging to appear in the show. She will tell you how Danny Kosak was extremely eager to bring Elias, his chimpanzee, more publicity. However, Dr. Hawkins, who's an expert in primatology behavior, will tell you that Danny Kosak should have known that bringing Elias to the show will end up in tragedy. Why? Because Elias the chimpanzee was not properly trained. Elias the chimpanzee did not have the adequate age, gender, and exposure to appear in the show. And this caused tragedy. On June 29th of 2017, Midland's After Dark held a rehearsal of the show. And Alex Grace will tell you how Elias the chimpanzee was acting out that morning, screaming and screeching from his dressing room. But Danny Kosak guaranteed Alex Grace that the chimpanzee will be ready for their rehearsal. This was not the case, because the action turned into tragedy. Today you will hear from AJ McLellan, a television star who has been at MTS before. AJ will tell you how MTS always follow the guidelines. They always follow rules. They always did what they were supposed to do. However, the only thing that Midland's After Dark had no control over was the poor training that and Elias the chimpanzee received before appearing on the show. Now let's go back to the rehearsal. When this rehearsal started, Alex Grace took her usual seat behind her desk, and then Danny Kosak and Elias appeared on the stage. After a short interaction with Alex Grace, Danny Kosak left the stage. Yes, Danny Kosak left Alex Grace alone with the chimpanzee. A couple of minutes into the interview, Elias the chimpanzee became unruly. He started screaming, screeching. He stood up from his chair and ran directly towards Grizzle Opana, one of the show's writers, who was standing right in front of Danny Kosak. The chimpanzee pummeled him, biting and scratching all over, and finally caused him his death. The scene was horrific and bloody, and today you will hear from different witnesses how, while this attack was taking place, Danny Kosak did nothing to stop it. After the negative publicity that the show received because of this incident, Millions After Dark with Alex Grace got cancelled, causing great economic damage to the plaintiff MTS. Members of the jury, the defense will try to tell their different story. They will come here and have Danny Kosak telling you that this was not his fault. But don't be fooled. Just remember that the only reason we're here today is because Danny Kosak failed to properly train the chimpanzee. Danny Kosak caused the tragedy. So, at the end of this trial, my co-counsel Fernando Rojas will come before you and ask you to find the defendant, Danny Kosak, liable. Thank you.
Opening statements from the witness.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Alex Grace was simply reaching for ratings. Because of this, Alex Grace failed to take the proper precautions necessary to have a live animal on set. My client, Danny Kosak, is an animal caretaker. As an animal caretaker, he provides a sanctuary for many different exotic animals. Naturally, Danny has a talent for safely interacting and training with animals. In 2013, Danny purchased Elias, the chimpanzee, from the sanctuary. Earlier this year, Midlands Television Studios reached out to Danny and Elias about bringing Elias on the show. Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace. After communicating with Danny, they arranged for him to appear on the show, and leading up to the show, Danny trained Elias to perform the tricks which MTS agreed upon. Danny also provided guidelines to ensure safety and protection of everyone involved. Unfortunately, during the rehearsal, the condition of the studio agitated Elias. This, combined with other factors, resulted in Elias running on the stage and attacking Crystal Opana. Sadly, this resulted in the passing of Crystal Opana. After this attack, Elias ran off stage and was killed by police. Alex Grace, the host of the show, has had a life in mediocrity. After high school, Grace started a theater career, and after touring for several years, Grace switched to movies and then switched to a local TV studio, Midlands Television Studios, to host a cooking show. After being canceled, Grace then hosted a late-night TV show, Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace. A year later, the show was canceled after the attack. Today, the plaintiff has the burden of proof. They have the burden by proving the preponderance of the evidence that Danny Kosak was negligent. We are confident they did not do that. So we are taking the burden of proof that they are negligent and breached their duty to Danny Kosak. Today, we have the burden of proof to show you by preponderance of evidence, meaning more likely than not, that Midland Television Studio breached their duty to Danny Kosak. To meet this burden, we will call 3 witnesses today. Our first witness is Hunter Cooper, who was on set that day of the show and saw everything that happened during rehearsal. He will testify that the plaintiff did not follow all the guidelines given him by Danny Kosak. Secondly, we will call Ashley Thornhill, Alex Grace's former personal assistant. Finally, we'll call Danny Kosak, who began his career training animals at a sanctuary back in 2003. He was responsible for training over 65 exotic animals. Danny Kosak has been training animals for 15 years, featuring at least 12 for media appearances. At the end of today's trial, the co-counsel, Easton, will come before you and show that Danny Kosak did everything in his power to prevent this attack from happening, and you'll see how Alex Grace was simply reaching for ratings. You'll see how the defendant, Danny Kosak, was not negligent and is not liable.
The plaintiff ready to proceed with their case in chief.
Yes, Your Honor. We'll call Alex Grace to stand. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is the Alex Grace, of course.
And Ms. Grace, where do you live?
I live at 2323 West Cole Road, and of course I do own a home in Beverly Hills next to Keanu.
And what do you do for a living?
I am, of course, the TV show host, Midlands After Dark with the Alex Grace, and then I am also an executive producer.
What is Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace?
Midlands After Dark with Alex Grace is their typical late night show. Think of Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel. I'm not yet on their level, but of course, I want to rise to that someday at my show.
And what were your responsibilities at the show?
My responsibilities at the show, besides being a television show host, I was the executive producer. So I was the forefront man on the set, of course. For all the stockholders, I oversee the little things, but of course, one person can't do everything. I had personal assistants take care of things and such.
Now, is the show still going on?
Sadly, no. My television studio family lost its home
And why is that?
because one of our family members was brutally murdered on set by Elias the chimpanzee.
Now, who is Elias the chimpanzee?
Elias the chimpanzee was a guest that I had on the show with Danny Kosak.
And how did you first met Elias?
So, I couldn't give you the date, but I do know like a year ago, Danny Kosak reached out to me. I got an email from him. I thought it was spam or, fan mail. So then finally I was scrolling through, checking the latest deets on E-News, and then I noticed Danny Kosak and Elias were going viral on Facebook. And so I was like, I knew this was gonna be a hit. I know the Irwins are coming back on Animal Planet, so like I decided to turn it up a notch a little bit.
Now, if I show you a copy of the Lions biography, will you be able to recognize it?
Of course.
Permission to upload version. Now, Miss Grace, what is this?
This is Elias's portfolio.
And who wrote this document?
I believe Danny Kosak, yes.
And how did you first become in contact with this document?
I was sent it via email.
And does it seem like a very accurate copy to you?
Yes.
Has it been changed or modified in any way?
No.
Your motion to enter into evidence succeeded.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Please so admitted.
Would you like a courtesy copy? So, Miss Grace, does it say in there who is the owner of the Elias 2000?
It just says I'm friends with Danny Kosak, or I met Danny Kosak, so I mean, not direct.
Thank you, Miss Grace. Permission to be for this evidence, motion to approve, and then add the motion to be published to the. Now, Miss Grace, you mentioned some emails, correct?
Yes,
If I show you a copy of these emails, will you recognize it?
of course.
Council. Exhibit 6. Miss Grace, how does your business conduct
So
communicate with each other?
our main form of communication on the studio, because we do have 12 sound stages and multiple things going on. Email is our main form of communication.
And what dates were these emails sent to you?
So I have May 31st, 2017, and then January 8th, 2017.
And does it seem like a very accurate copy to you?
Yes.
Have it been changed or modified in any way?
No.
Your motion to enter into evidence, Exhibit 6.
Any objections?
I'll object to hearsay, Your Honor.
Alright, counsel.
Your Honor, please second. Hearsay under records of regular conducted business activity.
Your
Your Honor,
response?
there's been no foundation laid that this is a regular conducted business activity, simply that these are correspondence between two people.
What foundation do you think is lacking, counsel?
I believe that this hasn't been laid as a regular business activity, simply a one-time occurrence.
We already established that Middle South Dakota conducts business through emails, which is like the regular conduct.
Briefly.
I believe that the testimony was between the people that work at Midlands Television Studios. These emails are between Danny Kosak, who does not work for the Midlands Studios.
Very briefly.
Middle South Dakota business is not just only within the business, but it also includes clients, that's the business.
I'll allow a little bit of latitude. The witness said that she corresponds with email for her business, so we overrule.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Grace, what is in these emails?
So it is emails between Danny Kosak and I coordinating in Midlands After Dark appearance.
Will you mind reading the statement email?
Yeah. So I know I wrote you a couple times about it last year, but I wanted to stress how much I need to appear on your show. Appearing on your show would have literally saved my animal sanctuary in my career, and it could help you too. I've read the tabloids. You know that Midlands After Dark's ratings are down, but I don't care. I'll come up with something that'll make you the talk of the town. People across the country will be talking about Midlands After Dark if you let me on your show. We both need this, so please respond. Sincerely, Danny.
Thank you, Ms. Grace. Motion to evidence. Relation to the bench, and notice to be published to you.
Yeah. Please wait for me to grant you permission before approaching the bench.
Now, Ms. Grace, was this the first first time you were having a chimpanzee in the set?
Yes, this was the first time we had any animal on set. We've never had an animal guest on the show before.
And did you check whether it was safe to bring a chimpanzee?
Of course, we consulted industry guidelines as well as not just one, not just two, but we went Bed Bath & Beyond. We consulted 5 experts.
Now, Ms. Grace, you mentioned some guidelines. If I show you a copy of this guidance, will you be able to recognize it?
Of course.
I'll show you some copies. Now, Ms. Grace, what is this?
This is the American Journal of Film and Theater Best Practices for Dealing with Live Animals in the Entertainment Industry.
Now, when was the document written?
It was written in spring 2008.
And did you use this document for anything?
Of course, this is what is used across all film, from Broadway to Paramount Pictures. We all use this. This is the standard in our industry of dealing with animals.
We're gonna have motion to enter the evidence, safe working.
Any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
So good.
Now, Ms. Grace, what do this article tell us?
Find an animal with prior experience. Provide adequate notice to people on or near set. Make sure to ease the animal into the spotlight. Limit the number of people on set. Retain at ease while on set with the animal.
And did you follow these guidelines?
Of course, we made sure to follow each and every one of these since it's standard. And it was the first time having an animal on set. We really wanted to know what we were doing.
Okay, so to do this, push them.
You may.
I want to this college today. Now, Ms. Grace, you also mentioned that you consulted experts, correct?
Yes,
How many experts did you consult with?
we consulted 5. We didn't feel like one was enough. We wanted to know everything and anything about having an animal on set.
Now, Ms. Grace, why did you call a rehearsal?
A rehearsal. It's not typical for us because, I know what I'm doing with my own show and we all know. But with an animal, anything could happen, things of that. So we wanted to give a set time for rehearsal, let it ease onto the set. We provided a green room, a closed area to be calm and everything to get acclimated to the set.
Did you talk to Danny Kosak the day of the rehearsal?
Yes, I did.
What did you guys talk about?
So we went over a game plan, but of course, before all that happened, I woke up, I couldn't tell you the time, probably like around 10 a.m. I woke up to blood-curdling screaming, and now that's not one way to wake up. But blood-curdling screaming, and of course flew out of my dressing room, and I knew Danny and Elias had shown up.
Now, did you talk with Danny Kosak?
Of course, going back, we did, before the rehearsal, we had a game plan. I went to his dressing room. We talked about such and such, our game plan about what's going to happen today during rehearsal and then the official show. We talked about meeting up and that I would greet them like all my other guests. I would shake Danny's hand and Elias's hand like all my other guests with consent of Danny. And then of course, while I was in there, I noticed that Elias was agitated. I'm not an animal expert, mind you, but
Objection, speculation.
Can you elaborate, counsel?
The witness is testifying saying that Elias was agitated, and therefore delving into the mindset of Elias.
Counsel?
And the witness just said that she's not an expert, but that's her perception of how the animal was acting.
How does the fact that she's not an expert go to her perception, counsel?
She is just saying that she's not an expert, but it's just like what she saw the animal doing.
Counsel, do you have a response?
Your Honor, there's been no testimony mentioned about what this witness saw Elias doing.
Yeah, counsel, I'm gonna agree. I don't think the foundation's been laid for this witness's perception, so I'm gonna sustain the objection.
Now, Ms. Grace, did you make any safety checks before the rehearsal?
yes, I did. I went around, I made sure that things were up, the signs were up on the doors, I did a quick safety check around the set, of course, before rehearsal.
What happened during the rehearsal?
So, the rehearsal started out like any other part of my show. I, of course, start with my excellent monologue. And then I go into introducing my fabulous guests. I give them a good intro as well too. Be generous. And so they walked on stage, I greeted them, shaked his hand, shaked Elias, welcomed them over. I sat at my desk. Elias sat in the chair closest to me and Danny in the chair farthest from me.
And what happened after that?
So at our game plan, we had to discuss asking both of them, getting to know their background, the animal sanctuary, things of that. And then we had planned a little bit in our game plan that Danny might get up and get out a camera sight so that I can look like I'm interviewing a chimp. It was gonna be super cute.
What happened after Danny Kosak goes to stage?
Well, Danny Kosak not only left camera sight, but he left the stage. And then I noticed he was standing behind a group of my riders, including Chris Bellafana. I could see him, not clearly, hopefully Elias did, but I couldn't see him. I don't know. But very far away, completely left our sound stage. So
How did Chris Bellafana die?
well, I noticed a demeanor change in Elias while we were practicing our questions and things of that nature. It was going quite well. Then 2 minutes in, he started changing. He stood up in his chair and started screaming and jumping up and down rapidly. I froze. I had no clue what was going on. I froze, instinct. And then Elias ran across the stage. And I ducked down underneath my desk for protection. They were screaming, blood-curdling screaming, both from Elias and from Chris. I didn't see what happened, but I knew before I ducked underneath my desk. I looked at Danny, and he was standing there, frozen as well, doing nothing, while I heard Chris screaming while he was being murdered. And let me tell you, I cannot remember the eyes of the chimpanzee, but I will always remember the screams of Chris Bellafana.
And what happened to your show in the aftermath of this accident?
Like I said before, our close TV show family lost its Homer. Our show was canceled.
Thank you, Ms. Kosak. No further questions.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? Good morning, Ms. Grace. I'd first like to start off by talking about your career before Midlands After Dark. You started out being a award-winning Broadway star, correct?
Objection to relevance.
Oh,
You started your career as an award-winning Broadway star, correct?
Of course.
And then you switched into Hollywood films, correct?
Yes.
And after the film Rocking Leo didn't receive as much success as you would have hoped for, that's when you made the switch to television?
Yes, I mean, we can't do everything perfect. We all have our good shows and our bad shows, but I mean, that was completely perfect. That's this.
So that's a yes to my question.
Yes.
And this is when you began to work for Midlands Television Studios on the show Cooking with Grace, correct?
Yes.
And that show got canceled due to low ratings as well, correct?
Yes, I am no Gordon Ramsay, I found out.
That's a yes to my question.
Yes.
And that's when you began working for Midlands Television Studios with Midlands After Dark, that was Grace, correct?
Yes.
The ratings were on decline for this show as well, weren't they?
Yes, they were on a decline, but hopefully I was going to get it back together.
But they were on the decline.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in 2017, the year of this attack, this was the lowest ratings you had ever received as a host, correct?
Yes, and Danny Kosak promised me some ratings, but it ended up with murder.
But these were the lowest ratings you'd ever experienced, correct?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to talk about the preparation that you took for having the lights on the set. Was there ever a safety meeting?
No.
But these guidelines, you had received guidelines from Danny Kosak, correct?
Yes, guidelines that he personally wrote.
And you read these guidelines,
I did.
and you completely understood these guidelines.
Yes.
But you never made sure that everyone on your team understood these guidelines fully, correct?
I sent out all guidelines given via email to all of my workers, and I made sure that we followed industry standards over personally written guidelines.
So to answer my question, you never made sure that all of your team was aware of or read these guidelines and understood them, correct?
Of Danny Kozak's driver?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, I'd like to talk about the rehearsal that happened. Now, you said that you scheduled Danny and Elias, and you were rehearsing. And you had practiced and planned that Danny Kosak would get up and leave so you could interview Elias, correct?
Yes.
And Danny Kosak did just that, correct?
Yes.
And then, all of a sudden, Elias became agitated, correct?
Yes.
And you froze out of fear, like you said earlier, correct?
Of course, human instinct.
And all of a sudden, Elias leaps from his chair and starts charging off stage, isn't that right?
Yes.
And you're so terrified, you hid under your desk, isn't that right?
Yes. For my own safety.
But you hid under your desk.
Yes.
In fact, you stayed there until the police arrived, correct?
Yes. I knew the police would handle the situation and get us out safely.
You did nothing except hide under your desk while this attack was happening?
I'm not prepared to face a chimpanzee full on.
That's a yes to my question.
Yes.
And now, under a desk, you would say it's pretty hard to see everything from happening, correct?
Yes.
Anything further from this witness, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Miss Grace, was it your job to train the chimpanzee?
No.
Whose job was it?
Danny Kozak.
Whose job was it to control the chimpanzee?
Danny Kozak.
Thank you, Your Honor, no questions. I asked my witness to be able to review this.
Any recross? Okay, she can step up.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff's like to call AJ McLellan over soon.
Alright.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is AJ McLellan. I am a actor alongside Alex Grace.
And where were you on June 29th, 2017?
I was on set of MTS Studios preparing for rehearsing for the upcoming show that night at MTS.
Was this your first time?
No, it was not.
Was this your first time on the set of this type?
Oh, yes, it was.
This was your first time on late night television?
Not
show?
late night television, on MTS. Or not MTS, sorry, this I have had much experience working on late night television and studios, also dealing with animals.
So you've been on late night television shows?
Yes, I have.
With animals?
Yes.
And did you observe anything abnormal on MTS's set?
No, not at all. It seems pretty accurate to what I've been used to.
Are there industry standards across the board?
Yes, there are. When we work with animals on set, we are to follow specific guidelines, standards to studio, and MTS seems to follow the standards that I have experienced everywhere else in working with animals on set.
Have you been on set with Danny Kosak before?
Yes, I have 2 or 3 times in the past, and for the most part, it's always professional.
What guidelines were in place prior to June 29th with Danny Kosak?
He had sent out an email giving us guidelines to be followed on set the night of the rehearsal and the show. And these are the same guidelines that I have experienced, I have watched while working within the class.
And you observe these guidelines being followed at the set of MTS?
Yes.
Can you attest specifically to any of the individual guidelines?
Yes, there were, okay, so, there was not supposed to be food on set, there were, I don't remember all the specific details. Yes, I read over the guidelines and I was familiar with them.
Your Honor, may I retrieve Exhibit 22 for those?
Council. 14, 6, and 3.
Would you recognize these guidelines if I showed them to you?
Yes, certainly.
Permission to approach opposing counsel. Mr. McLellan, what are those?
These are the safety guidelines I have received from Danny Kosak via email.
Those are the safety guidelines that are commonly used in all of his appearances?
Yes, every time I have worked with Danny Kosak, it's just these.
Please take a minute to read over those and tell me if you can attest to any ones you specifically saw followed at the MTS set on June 29th.
Yes, no other animals should be present. There were signs posted on MTS Studios that stated that there was an animal on set.
Let me ask you this, Mr. McLellan.
Yes.
Were you able to have contact with Elias or Danny Kosak?
No, I was not.
And why is that?
Because there was no one supposed to be in here. Danny Kosak or Elias the Chip.
So you were denied access because MTS followed
Yes.
the guidelines?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? You said that you were on set the day of June 29, 2017, correct?
Yes.
And that was because you received a text from Priscilla Fauna asking you to be there?
Yes.
Would you recognize a copy of those messages if I had them here for you today?
Yes.
Approaching opposing counsel, Exhibit 12. Permission to approach the witness with the same.
You may.
Would Your Honors like a courtesy copy? Now, this is a text message conversation between you and Priscilla Fauna, correct?
Yes, it is.
And you are aware, based on the guidelines that you just presented in your direct examination, that there's not supposed to be extra people on set, correct?
Yes.
And now Chris sent you a text message that says, I was hoping you could come to rehearsal tomorrow. We'd like you to join the segment with Danny Kosak's gym.
Objection,
Did I
Your
read
Honor,
that?
this is hearsay.
Your Honor, this is not hearsay because of Rule 801 D2D, which is a statement elicited by a party opponent.
Who's the party opponent?
Chris Wilbon.
Counsel? How is Chris Wilbon a party opponent?
He is an agent working for he was an agent working for MTS at the time.
Do you plan on admitting this document, or do you just plan on having his witness read it?
I will be admitting it to evidence.
Okay, let's do that before we have the witness reading from it.
Okay. Permission to, the plaintiff would like to offer Exhibit 12 into evidence.
Any objections to entering Exhibit 12 into evidence, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, this is still hearsay.
Counsel, do you have a response to it?
This is not hearsay because of Rule 801 D2D, which is a statement elicited by a party opponent.
Do you have a response to A1 G2D counsel?
No, Your Honor.
Your objection is overruled.
So the text message reads, I was hoping you could come to rehearsal tomorrow. We'd like you to join the segment with Danny Kosak's chimp. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did. We never actually, though, I was never around Danny Kosak or the chimp. We were stopped before that.
But you were still on set that day.
Yes.
Permission to approach and tender evidence to the bench?
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that there was supposed to be no food on set, is that correct?
Yes.
But you ate food from the buffet that was on set.
No, that isn't correct.
You did not?
No.
You did not notice the buffet on set?
I'm sorry, you asked if I ate food.
I will rephrase the question. You noticed that there was a buffet on set, is that correct?
Yes, I did notice this.
And you said that there was supposed to be no food on set because you're at the safety guidelines, right?
Yes. The food was moved prior to the rehearsal.
But there was still food on set that day?
Yes.
Okay. I want to direct your attention to the rehearsal. Now, you saw Alex Grace reach towards Elias during the rehearsal, correct?
Yes, I did.
And it specifically states in the safety guidelines not to reach towards Elias, correct?
It says that you should avoid contact with Elias in the first place.
But he still made an effort to reach towards Elias.
I would not say that. I have no idea what he was going to do. You're coming towards him. I have no idea whether or not he was actually going to touch Elias or not.
No further questions.
Anything further from this witness, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. McLellan, were you asked to be on set by Alex Grace?
No, I wasn't.
And in reference to the food, was it actually on set?
No, it was before. It wasn't on set. It was in the studio, but it was way before the rehearsal began.
So the food is a fair distance away from set?
Yes, it is.
And did you see Alex Grace move after or before the chimpanzee started to attack?
I saw him move after the chimpanzee started to. Yeah.
No further questions.
No requests.
Witness may step down. Anything further from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff calls Dr. Hawkins to stand. May it please the court? Please introduce yourself to the court.
Yes, my name is Dr. Willoughby Hawkins.
Dr. Hawkins, what do you do for a living?
Yes, so currently I am an Amber Lowry professor as well as department chair of anthropology at Midland State University.
Dr. Hawkins, how did you come to hold such a title?
I've come to hold such a title through 2 decades of both undergraduate and graduate level professing, albeit through biological anthropology, evolutionary anthropology, primatology, as well as animal sciences and psychology.
Dr. Hawkins, what other academic accolades do you hold?
So of course I hold a bachelor degree in both biological anthropology and psychology. Additionally, I attained my PhD in animal sciences, specifically within the field of primatology.
Dr. Hawkins, in order to receive this degree, what kind of research did you do?
Yes, so for my PhD, I spent 2 years in the Cassandra-Photeitis chimpanzee sanctuary, essentially observing the behavioral tendencies of chimpanzees and how they act and react to given stimuli.
Dr. Hawkins, let's talk about your publications. How many do you have?
Yes, I have 30 peer-reviewed scientific journals.
What does that mean, Dr. Hawkins?
Essentially what these means is that these are academic journals in which I have written and been published, and I have been peer reviewed by other esteemed academics in my field to ensure that not only was my work of the utmost quality, but additionally that my methods and methodology of conducting my experiments were reliable as well.
Dr. Hawkins, can you explain to the court what peer review means?
Yes, so essentially peer reviewed is whenever the other academics scrutinize my work. They ensure not only the validity of it, but also how I applied my methods in my research and if my conclusions were in fact viable.
Let's talk about your methods. What are those?
Yes, so essentially I will look at data on a spectrum, both qualitatively and primarily quantitatively, to reach my decisions. And they have been tried and true and fact-checked in numerous times.
Let's talk about your publications. Do you have any that are connected to this case or help with this case?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, 5 of my academic journals relate directly to the training of and choice of chimpanzees for performances.
Dr. Hawkins, let's talk about your appearances in court. Is this the first time that you've appeared in trial?
No, absolutely not. I have testified 25 times, 14 times for the plaintiff and 11 for the defense.
So let's talk a little bit about how you got involved in today's case. How did you become involved?
I was involved in today's case whenever the plaintiff MTS contacted me requesting my expertise.
And what were you to do?
I was to essentially analyze the reasons surrounding the attack on June 29th of 2017 and come to a definitive conclusion of what caused this incident.
And what evidence or data were you supposed to look over in order to get to that conclusion?
Yes, I analyzed the depositions of Alex Grace and Danny Kosak, as well as the affidavits of AJ McLellan and Jameson Clark, as well as exhibits 1, 2, and 3, which is of course pertinent information about Elias. Exhibit 5, the autopsy of Chris Viafana, 6 through 11, which are relevant emails, 14, which is the industry standard for having live animals on set, and finally Exhibit 23, which were the safety guidelines provided to MTS by Danny Kosak.
Dr. Hawkins, what methods did you use in order to conduct your research?
Yes, I used my typical quantitative and statistical analysis to analyze why Elias was chosen and whether or not the selection of and training of this performance animal had anything to do with the attack in today's case.
Dr. Hawkins, are these the standard practices and methods in your field?
Yes, absolutely.
And did you reasonably apply them to your research?
Yes, I have applied these same research methods that have been peer-reviewed to today's case.
Let's talk about your findings. What did you find in today's case?
Essentially, I found that the selection of Elias as a performance chimpanzee was inherently flawed. Additionally, the training was simply inadequate.
So let's talk about why the selection of Elias was wrong. Why was that?
Yes, there were 4 key reasons why it was wrong. It was his age, gender, previous environment, and previous acts of aggression.
Let's talk about age. Why was that an issue?
This is an issue because Elias the chimpanzee was 10 years old. At this point, he will have nearly completed puberty, meaning that he is stronger. He has longer fingernails and longer canines, statistically increasing the likelihood of a deadly attack.
And what about gender? Why was that an issue?
Gender is an issue because statistically speaking, the majority of attacks occur from a male chimpanzee. So a male chimpanzee of the age of 10, such as Elias, again, statistically increase the likelihood that an attack would occur.
What about previous acts of aggression?
Previous acts of aggression is also important because if a chimpanzee has acted out in the past, again, it should warrant restraint whenever moving forward. And I found this to be the case with Elias.
Why was this the case with Elias?
This was the case with Elias because in my independent research, I actually discovered that he had had one other startle reaction on the Byron Fellow Show in 2015. While although it wasn't necessarily to the magnitude of this case, it should have warranted restraint from an expert animal trainer such as Danny Kosak.
And what about the previous environment? Why was that an issue?
The previous environment is a problem because Elias was exposed to humans a lot in the sanctuary. And although that may sound like a good thing, it's actually the inverse. You see, whenever chimpanzees are exposed to humans, they recognize their superior strength, which again increases the likelihood that an attack would occur.
Now, let's talk about the training. Why was the training flawed?
The training was flawed because Danny Kosak chose to employ a continuous schedule rather than a partial or fixed ratio schedule whenever training Elias for the new trip.
And why was this dangerous, Dr. Hawkins?
This is dangerous because whenever you use a continuous schedule, you reward the chimpanzee every time they conduct the desired behavior. So what happens is that the chimpanzees become expectant of the reward. Thus, whenever they do the trick, such as on June 29th of 2017, without receiving the reward, they become unruly and aggressive, such as the case with Elias.
Dr. Hawkins, one last question. Based on your scientific expertise, as well as the evidence that you reviewed, to a degree of certainty, who do you believe was at fault in today's trial?
It is in my professional opinion, to a more than reasonable degree of scientific certainty, that the blame should be placed on Danny Kosak for the selection of an inadequate live performance animal, as well as the inadequate training for the given circumstances.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any Brooks?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Hawkins. I'd like to start off by talking about your education and your experience. You have a diverse background in studying animals, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. Animal sciences, primatology, psychology, biological anthropology, you name it.
And you don't have any experience in training animals, though, do you?
No, I simply do the observation both quantitatively and qualitatively.
So you haven't trained animals.
No, absolutely not.
And you study primates in general,
Yes,
but you've never trained a primate.
I've never trained a primate, but again, I spent over 2 years observing how chimpanzees react, and from the outside looking in, I can determine the likelihood of an attack occurring.
And you've never met Elias the chimp, have you?
No.
And you weren't on set June 29, 2017.
No, I was not, which is why I rely on statistical analysis of the evidence and the data that I was provided with.
Alright, let's talk about the factors involved in choosing a performance chimp. Male chimps don't fully mature until 11 to 12 years, correct?
That is correct, but by the age of 10, they have already began puberty and nearly completed, meaning they are stronger, they have larger canines and larger fingernails. Again, statistically, facts are fact. That increases the likelihood of an attack.
But you admit that only 80% of male chimps enter puberty at the age of 6 to 7, correct?
Yes, that's correct, which is why even if he was a late bloomer, say around the age of 8 or 9, Elias was 10 years old. This means at this point in time, statistically, he has grown stronger and more aggressive to acts of violence.
But you never met Elias, so you're not for sure if he was a late bloomer or not, correct?
Absolutely. I have no knowledge of that. However, what I do know is his age, his gender, previous acts of aggression, and previous environment, all of which statistically increase the likelihood of an attack.
And for this case, you reviewed a number of materials, correct?
Yes, absolutely. All extremely adequate in coming to a definitive conclusion.
And among those materials, a document called Safety Guidelines.
Yes, absolutely. Not only the standard practices, Exhibit 14, but also Exhibit 23, which were the guidelines provided by Danny.
And you'd recognize that question today in court.
Yes, of course.
Permission to opposing counsel, Exhibit 23.
You may. Are you approaching opposing counsel or the witness?
My bad, opposing counsel. Permission to approach opposing counsel. Would you like a copy? Exhibit 23 is the safety guidelines, correct?
Yes, the ones provided by Danny to Midlands Television Studio.
And is this a accurate copy?
Yes, absolutely.
Nothing's been altered in any way
No, not at all.
at this time? If it's like that, or Exhibit 23 is evidence?
Any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
And I'd like to go through this document. You could look at minute number, guideline number 1, number 5, number 8, and number 14. And these are all warnings for potential risk, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And everybody was supposed to look at the guidelines.
Yes, to the best of my knowledge.
And once again, was there any evidence that Elias was an aggressive chimp?
Yes, there was. Again, the Byron Fellows incident in 2015, while although it wasn't necessarily deadly, it was a startle reaction. And again, as an experienced animal trainer, Danny Kosak should have known that given the age, gender, and previous environment, any previous act of aggression is simply irresponsible to continue with a live performance animal, as he did.
But there was no violence in that, correct?
Well, although it wasn't necessarily harm, I would say it was a violent outburst because of the strict nature of a chimpanzee and the startle reaction that occurred. Yes, no harm was concurred to anyone, however, it was inherently a violent reaction by the chimpanzee.
And one last time, you never met Elias, correct?
That is absolutely correct. I went off of qualitative and quantitative analysis, which has led me to a number of definitive conclusions, no different in today's case.
Is that a yes or no question? You never met Elias?
Yes, I have never met Elias the chimpanzee.
Anything further from this witness, counsel?
Your Honor, if I may ask my timekeeper before, so I know how much time I have left. 20 seconds. Just one question, Your Honor.
Alright.
Okay, this court, Dr. Hawkins, who was responsible for training Elias?
The person responsible for training Elias and making sure that it was an adequate performance would be Danny Kosak.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You recross. This witness may step down. Anything further from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor, at this time, we rest our case and she only asked that we be allowed a brief recess and order on.
Yeah, we'll keep it to 5 minutes.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Alright, is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to call Hunter Cooper. May I proceed?
Yeah.
Please state your name for the court.
Hi, I'm Hunter Cooper.
And what is your current residence?
You know, I don't really have a residence. I like to stay with friends, and when my friends are not available, I stay in my van with my dog.
And what is your education?
I graduated from the University of Chicago with a degree in creative writing and history.
What is your current occupation?
I've worked a number of odd jobs. Right now, I'm a tour guide, and I like to give tours all over the place to different celebrities' houses, including Alex Grace's house.
So you mentioned that you were a tour guide. What all does that job entail?
You know, driving around the area, I like to give people, of course, like I said, I like to take people to Alex's house and, do research there.
You mentioned Alex Grace. What is your relationship with Alex Grace?
Alex Grace and I, we have a very professional relationship.
And you mentioned that you conduct research on Alex Grace. What does that research consist of?
You know, I do research on Alex Grace because as someone who aspires to be a screenwriter, I deem Alex Grace to be someone who would be great for my screenplays that I write.
Now, I want to direct your attention to June 29th of 2017. What were you doing that day?
Oh, that was just, that was a horrible night, really. That was a horrible night for Alex Grace and for me. I got to the set and I was like, I saw, Alex Grace, of course, talking there, being very professional as normal. And there was this person I saw that I eventually got to know is Danny Kosak. And I don't know, there was just something off-putting about him, but he kept complaining about there's all this wonderful food, and I was like, this is great food, and for some reason, he was complaining about this food that was in your set.
And what did you observe when you arrived on set that day?
I arrived on set, and just like normal, I took my normal seat, and I began to do my research as per the normal. And, the production began, the pre-show. And I saw Elias and Danny, they were sitting there, and they were, Alex began his conversation, and Elias was, sitting there as well. And I saw Danny get up, and he, walked about, 3 body lengths away from me, right over there. And, I saw Alex, of course, do his normal production, and Alex was sitting there, and all of a sudden, I saw him kind of get up. Alex had previously had the POTUS on the show, and he did this marvelous thing where he likes playing with people's hair, okay? So, with POTUS, he reached towards their hair, and, he played with it a little bit. and I saw Alex kind of start doing what appeared to be the same thing as that, and all of a sudden I saw Elias.
What happened after Elias started, as you say, freaking out?
You know, he was really freaking out. He kind of like jumped up and started screaming, and like this was really, I tried to block this from my mind. It was really quite an atrocious sight for me. I'm sure, of course, Alex Grace. And Elias got up and he started running. And he started running towards Chris Villafana. And he jumped up and he started attacking and he started eating Chris Villafana's face off. And this was just horrific.
And as you were there on set, what was Alex Grace doing as this was going down?
Honestly, I didn't see Alex Grace anywhere. And, you know, I really like Alex Grace. I don't know where he was.
No further questions now.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Cooper, when you arrived, you said that Danny Kosak was being agitated, correct?
And he seemed a little annoyed.
You said that Danny Kosak was complaining about the conditions of the set,
Yeah, all that food and stuff, you know.
and you said in your testimony today that the food was near the set, but as the guidelines indicate, it was not on the set, correct?
Approximately 15 minutes prior to the show, I didn't see any food, but there was definitely food there.
But you attested that the food was not on set, correct?
They didn't put the buffet on the set, no.
And when you were on set, you saw safety warnings on all doors, didn't you?
I did.
Would you recognize these safety warnings if I showed them to you?
I believe I would.
Is this what was posted on the set of MTS that day?
It was, yes. Warning, live animal on set.
You mentioned to approach opposing counsel.
Sure.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move to enter Exhibit 16 into evidence.
Counsel?
I'd like to object to hearsay.
Your Honor, this is not a regularly conducted business activity. It was posted on the business process of conducting business.
Didn't the witness just read the whole thing into the record?
The
The witness just read the document out loud?
no, he did not, sir.
Okay. Your response to the hearsay then, what was it?
It's regularly conducted business.
Your response?
That isn't regular. The Alex Grace doesn't usually have animals on the show. This isn't a regular conducted business activity.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard any foundation about how this is a regularly conducted business activity, counsel, so sustain for now.
Yes, Your Honor. You did see the warning signs on the doors, didn't you?
I'm pretty sure I did.
And you saw Alex Grace move after Elias began to, didn't you?
Began to what?
After Elias began to attack.
No.
You did not see the chimpanzee move before Alex Grace.
Before Alex Grace.
Before Alex Grace hit.
Hid.
Yes.
Alex Grace moved, of course, towards Elias, and then Elias moved.
No further questions.
Any redirect, counsel, for?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Alright, you may step down. Anything further from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense would like to call Ashley Thornhill to the stand.
Would you mind sitting here for just 2 seconds while I put this
Oh,
on
I'm
fast?
so sorry.
That's okay.
Could you please state your name for the court?
My name is Ashley Thornhill.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Thornhill?
Well, I was a makeup artist for Alex Grace on Midland's television studio.
Now, you mentioned Alex Grace. How do you know Alex Grace?
I knew Alex for many years. In fact, I followed her from Hollywood to Midlands after working with her.
Now, you followed Alex Grace from Hollywood to Midlands. Why did you do that?
I was promised to be the head makeup artist at the studio. However, I never got that job. In fact, I ended up just becoming a personal assistant and makeup artist for Alex alone.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you worked for MTS, Midland's Television Studios. Is this what you were referring to earlier?
It is.
And you were the makeup artist for Alex Grace on this show, correct? And what were your duties as makeup artist and personal assistant?
Well, besides making sure Alex looked presentable to be on front of camera, which was no easy task, I also had to clean up her office and prepare everything for her.
Now, Ms. Thornhill, I'd like to direct your attention to the day of June 20th, 2017. What were you doing that day?
On that day, I was in Alex's office cleaning as I normally am, and Alex wasn't there. And she received a phone call, so I picked up, and it was Danny.
What did Danny Kosak say?
Deputy Runner, this is Susan.
Counsel?
If I may plead to offer proof, the testimony that this witness will say Danny is planning on changing the animal that is going to be on this set, which would be an exception to hearsay under Rule 8033 of the existing mental state, which can go to the intent or plan of the technology.
Counsel, do you have a response?
Yes, Your Honor, this is still hearsay. This is not a court statement, and it's asserted. And this is still hearsay.
Over.
Ms. Thornhill, would you like me to ask that question?
Yes.
Now, what did Danny Kosak say on this phone call?
Well, whenever I answered the phone, he was talking really fast. So by the time I explained to him who I was, he seemed really worried about the show that was coming up. And he kept saying that he wanted to replace Elias so that the show would run smoothly and nothing would go wrong. And I told him to email Alex in contact with her.
Was Alex informed about this information?
She was. I informed her of it the next day, and I told her how worried Danny seemed, and all she said, if anything were to go wrong, all the better for ratings.
Now, Ms. Thornhill, I'd like to direct your attention to the day of June 29th, 2017. Were you on set that day?
I was in the studio.
And what were you doing?
I got Alex ready for the show that day, and then I proceeded to clean up her office as usual.
And what happened while you were cleaning up her office?
Well, besides cleaning up my supplies, I also had to clean up an empty wine bottle that wasn't very skillfully hidden, and I found a receipt.
And would you recognize a copy of that receipt I showed to you today?
Yes.
May I approach opposing counsel with Exhibit 19?
You may.
Approaching the witness to the sign. And would Your Honor like a courtesy copy? Ms. Thornhill, what did I just hand you?
This is the receipt I found in her office that day.
And is it a fair and accurate copy?
It is.
And has it been changed or altered in any way?
Yes.
At this time, the defense would like to offer Exhibit 19 as evidence.
Any objections, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, hearsay.
Counsel, do you have a response to the hearsay?
This is an exception to hearsay due to a regular conducted business activity. This receipt is automatically generated by the liquor store that is located on the receipt.
Counsel? Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree, sustained.
May I retrieve evidence and try that? Now, Ms. Thornhill, after cleaning Alex's office, what did you do next?
Well, after I cleaned up her office, I started hearing a bunch of screaming and strange noises from outside. So I went outside to try to figure out what was even going on.
And what did you see?
Alex came up to me and she just fired me.
Do you know why you were fired, Ms. Thornhill?
I honestly have no idea.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to the preparation that you took for having Elias on set while you were still employed through the television studios. Did you have any duties?
Well, I did make and hang up a sign.
And would you recognize a copy of that sign if I showed it to you today?
Yes.
Approaching opposing counsel with Exhibit 16. Approaching witness. Ms. Thornhill, what did I just hand you?
You handed me the sign that I made.
And is it a fair and accurate copy of that sign?
It is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
Yes.
This time the defense would like to offer Exhibit 16 into evidence.
Any objections?
No,
Alright, it will be so admitted.
Now, Ms. Thornhill, who made this sign?
I made it.
And did you hang the sign up?
Well, I can't really remember if I hung it up on the door, all the doors. It was really disorganized that day, and so I just really don't remember.
Yeah. Ms. Thornhill, to your knowledge, was there ever any safety check to make sure that these signs were hung up on all the doors?
No, no one ever came to check to make sure, so I assumed it was fine and it didn't really matter.
Permission to retrieve evidence and to move the bench. And at this time, the defense has no further questions for Ashley Thornhill.
Any cross?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ms. Thornhill, you spend a lot of time with Dr. Hawkins today. I do. As a personal assistant, I'm pretty much with her wherever she goes. You know that Windows After Dark had an early success, right? It did, but even when the success was good, Alex just kept drinking, and then the ratings fell, and her drinking got a lot worse. Permission to go to Permission to go to Ms. Thornhill, this is an email that was sent to you and to all the staff of NPS, correct? It is. And to this email, there are some elements attached, correct? It is. And so if I show you a copy of these items, will you recognize them? Permission to open the post. You have seen these items before, haven't you? I have. Danny sent these to us, and I know Danny was the one who sent it, but we never held a meeting to go over them or even discuss them. Now, regardless of the meeting, you have seen these items before, because Alex words will become unpleasant if somebody were to ignore your needs, correct? Well, in Alex's opinion, Alex can be quite unpleasant, but she's just. Now, Ms. Thornhill, you worked at NPS when Danny Kosak wasn't there, correct? I was, but I was not a witness to what happened. And you're aware that Danny Kosak was begging a favorite show, correct? I suppose so. Now, about this phone call on June 20th, you remember that, right? I do. That's when Danny was trying to replace Elias so that the show would go smoothly and nothing would happen. So you picked up this phone call, and Danny Kosak was apologizing, correct? He was, like I said, he seemed really worried and was wanting to make sure this show went smoothly. And the reason that Danny Kosak was apologizing was because Elias was not going to be ready for the rehearsal, correct? Yes, and Danny wanted to replace him so that the show would go smoothly. And although Elias was not going to be ready, Danny Kosak broke the tendency on the agenda, correct? Well, Alex said if anything were to go wrong, I'll put that for ratings. Now, Ms. Thornhill, you were fired from NPS, were you not? I was, and I still have no idea why. And you attended the funeral of Chris Volpana, correct? I did. MTS is really close, and the fact that Chris died, I wanted to give him the last of her. And isn't it true that when you went up and you did your condolences to Harper, you were angry at MTS, correct? Well, I was fired without any reason why. And you were angry at MTS? Yes. Ms. Thornhill, in fact, you were very furious at Alex's words, correct? I suppose you could say so. Being fired unexpectedly is pretty angering. And while you were furious, you told Harper Villafana that nothing.
Hearsay.
Counsel?
This is an exception to hearsay under excited audience.
Briefly.
There has been no foundation laid as to what event caused the excitement. For an excited utterance, it has to be directly after or immediately following the event that caused the excitement. The witness was fired days before this occurred.
If I may.
Very briefly, counsel.
Yes, sir. Ashley Thornhill said that she was furious, and while she was furious, she made these statements.
Yeah, the fact that she was upset about being fired or angry doesn't necessarily rise to the level of cyber utterance, so unless you have another exception, I'm gonna sustain the objection, counsel. Alright, the objection is sustained.
You are given some guidance to the student, correct? I think I might have been. The guidance you are holding, are those the ones who are given to the student?
These are the ones Danny sent us and Alex sent through email.
But isn't it true that when Danny Kosak came to the set, he asked him to distribute some guidance?
It might be.
Did you distribute them?
I might have, I can't really remember right now.
Did you remember?
Anything further from this witness, counsel?
No redirect, I guess that's the witness you'll have to step down.
She may. Yeah, anything further from the defense?
Yes, the defense would like to call Danny Kosak to the stand. Good morning, Mr. Kosak. Would you like to introduce yourself to the court by stating your name?
Yes, I'm Danny Kosak.
And what is your occupation?
I'm the owner of the Red Hawk Animal Sanctuary.
And Danny, what is your education?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Animal Science from the University of Florida. I graduated in 1995 in dog enforcement.
So you take care and train animals?
Yes, I've done both.
And what qualifies you to do so?
I own the 3 separate facilities. The Cincinnati Zoo, the Midlands Animal Sanctuary, and my own Red Hawk Animal Sanctuary.
And how long have you been training animals?
I've been training animals for 15 years now.
And generally, how do you train these animals?
I use 4 different techniques: positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, extinction, and punishment.
All right, let's get into those types. What can you explain positive reinforcement
Yes,
is?
of course. Positive reinforcement is to regularize and treat for every desired trait that he performs.
And negative reinforcement?
Negative reinforcement is when I take away something Elias does not like after a desire.
And how about punishment?
Punishment is when I advise an aversive behavior toward Elias when he does something I do not like.
And lastly, can you explain extinction?
Yes. Extinction is when I take away something he likes after he does something I do not like.
And so you're speaking on Elias. Is there any specific ways you train Elias?
Yes, 2 different ways. First, I start with continuous positive reinforcement, and then I transition into fixed ratio positive reinforcement.
Now, when did you get Elias?
I got him in October of 2013.
And over the past few years, what environment has he lived in?
We lived in the animal sanctuary of Hardy in North Carolina in 2013 until then. After that, he lived with me in the Red Hawk Animal Sanctuary until his passing.
Let's talk about leading up to the show on Midlands After Dark. What was the preparation like for the show?
Preparation is simple. 150 hours approximately spent with him, training to avoid large crowds and the noises associated with those.
And has Elias ever appeared on any other media appearances?
Yes, 18 television shows as well as 2 movies.
And were there tricks that you taught him to get on the show, or is there anything going on?
Yes, simple tricks such as shake his head, nod his head, bury his head in his hands, smile, act as a normal guest.
And did you feel like Elias was ready and prepared for?
Yes, he's prepared for my standards, but usually I like to spend more time to make sure he's extra prepared for shows like this.
How did you feel going into yourself? Did you feel like you were prepared?
I felt rushed by Alex Grace, honestly.
And now let's go to the day of the show. What happened when you got on set?
When I got on set, I took Elias to the room. I let him out of his transfer cage for about 10 minutes. We hung out in there, and I let him get accustomed to the room.
Was there any uncertainty going on that day?
Yes, when Alex Grace came in, she told me that the bits seemed dull and needed spiced up. As well, she reeked of alcohol.
Okay, now let's go to the rehearsal. Can you tell me what happened there?
Yes, of course. Elias sat down in his chair, and things were going right. I walked off stage to enjoy some chicken wings from the buffet, and then Elias stood up and started screeching and yelling.
And what did you do?
After that, Alice Grace foolishly reached towards Elias and Elias, causing him to run off set, unfortunately resulting in the death of Chris Farmer.
And in that moment when Elias started freaking out running across stage, what was going through your mind?
I froze. I knew there was nothing else I could do.
And you feel as if Alice Grace's crew read the guidelines and were more prepared that this incident would ever happen?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, improper opinion by the witness.
Can you elaborate, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, it goes to the ultimate issue, which is whether the incident would have occurred, whether if the MTS crew had read the guidelines, and it is the opinion of the witness. In order for that opinion to come in, the witness has to be an expert, and the opposing counsel has not laid down the foundation that this expert is a witness and is able to testify on to that.
So the witness needs to be an expert to testify to whether or not the crew should have.
Issue.
So you're saying the ultimate issue is whether or not the crew should have read the guidelines?
This goes to the ultimate issue. The witness is going to say that if the crew had read the guidelines, this wouldn't have occurred, which goes to the ultimate issue of to why the incident occurred.
Okay, I think I understand. Counsel, do you have a response?
Your Honor, I believe my client Danny Kosak is an expert with all of his years of training and schooling, and I'm simply asking him to Alice Grace and then read the guidelines and what would happen if they were more productive with those.
Your Honor, may I respond?
No need. I'm going to allow them to go into whether or not he believes they should have read the guidelines. If it goes too deep into whether or not that was causation, feel free to renew your objection, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor.
Again, you feel as if Alice Grace's crew was prepared with the guidelines.
Yes, I feel like if they read the guidelines, this whole incident potentially
Objection,
could
Your
not
Honor.
happen.
Sustained.
And I said it, the statement be stricken from the record.
It'll be straight.
No more questions.
Any cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I please report? Mr. Kosak, you are an animal trainer, correct?
That's correct.
In fact, right now you're a caretaker for the Dr Hawkins.
Yes, I've done both as I mentioned.
And before that, you worked at the Midlands Animal Sanctuary.
That's correct.
And at the time of the appearance, your animal sanctuary was actually struggling, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, unfortunately.
In fact, it was struggling so much that you were operating at a deficit, correct?
That is correct.
And you knew that if you didn't get any donors, you would have to shut down in a few months.
To my understanding, that is correct.
Now, that is also why you begged Alex Grace to let you on the show, correct?
Just more than each other because we both needed this.
Mr. Kosak, you sent Alex Grace an email stating that you needed to be on the show, correct?
Yes.
And it was because you needed, and you also stated in that email that this would save your career.
That is correct.
Now, after Janice, you received a date to appear on the show, correct?
That's correct.
And you sent over some guidelines.
Correct.
You also said that you trained Elias for this appearance, correct?
Yes, 150 hours.
But in your deposition, you stated that you only trained Elias for 8 hours for this trick.
What trick is
The trick that you were to perform on Midlands After Dark, you only trained Elias for 8 hours.
Which trick specifically?
The hand signal trick.
Yes,
You only trained Elias for 8 hours.
that's correct.
Now let's talk about the training that you did with Elias. You stated that you spent over 150 hours training Elias, correct?
That's correct.
And that training was to ignore stimuli.
Yes,
The stimuli was supposed to be loud noises,
correct.
food,
Correct.
bright lights.
Correct.
This is all stimuli that you stated you trained Elias to ignore.
That's correct.
But you never checked with any experts in your field to make sure that Elias was actually adequately trained to ignore the stimuli, correct?
I am an expert in my field, there's no need for that.
You never checked with any other experts in your field, did you?
I know my lives better than anyone.
Mr. Kosak, that's a yes to my question.
That is
You
correct.
never trained,
Due to the fact that I am an expert.
you never checked with any other experts, did you?
No, I did not need to.
Now, let's go ahead and talk about the date in question. You said that on that date, you arrived on the show, correct?
That is correct.
And you said that there was food on the set.
That is correct.
But
Chamberlain's.
you didn't tell anyone that there was an issue with that, did you?
No, because it was in the guidelines that this was an issue previously before the show. They should have heard the guidelines and they would have known.
So, Mr. Kosak, what you're saying is that you saw a violation, correct?
That is correct.
And you never said anything about it.
It was in the guidelines.
But you never,
Previously before the show.
Mr. Kosak, you never said anything about the
Not on the day
violation.
of the show, not because it was in the guidelines.
That's the note to my question, you never said anything about
That's
it?
correct.
Even though you knew that it was a violation, correct?
Yes, of course, it's in the guidelines. I knew.
The guidelines that you had written.
That is correct.
Now, it also said that no one was, in your guidelines, it specifically said that no one was to touch lives, correct?
That is correct.
But yet, we heard today that, Miss Grace shook hands with the lives, correct?
She was supposed to do this.
And that was while you were standing there?
That's correct.
And you didn't say anything about that either, did you?
That's correct.
So, at this point, we have mentioned at least 2 violations that you saw, correct?
That is correct.
And you never said anything about it.
It was in the guidelines previously to the show, but we're
Mr.
that is correct. That is correct.
Mr. President, going back to my question. You never said anything even though you knew that there were violations, correct?
That is correct.
And you at any point could have said something about those, could you?
That is correct.
And you chose not to.
That is correct because they were previously stated in the guidelines before the show.
So,
Thank you.
to my question, you never said anything, did you?
Not during the show.
You have any questions, John?
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to.
Nothing further from the defense?
No, at this time the defense rests their case in chief. Let me ask for a brief 5 to 10 minute recess.
We do not have time for a recess.
That clock's actually an hour ahead.
Oh, it is. Okay, yes, please, by all means. Okay, I thought we were really crunching. It's like, oh boy. Okay, take 10 minutes.
May I?
Yes.
I never, we should, but we should have
maybe it's not a lot of time for feedback.
No, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry.
the post-it notes that were on. Yes.
I have 10:51.
And now, this clock has a
Indeed for the day.
yes. Break on that. How can we do with a short person? Okay, I set it back, and you get to take it back up. And I'll move my shoes. Yeah, it's kind of a bitch, isn't it? Ah! For like 9, 10 years.
I thought about taking some time off, but I was like, if I feel like I don't want to go to law school, if I I know we all enough to know I won't go back to school and stuff.
Interesting. Well, I didn't know where the score is, and then you get rid of it, so
Exactly.
Like, I don't really know, like, you know, easier, so luckily.
Just tell me you're good.
Exactly.
You know, there were obviously things that were straight in.
Oh, we've been about that, no. I don't know how we do it, watch this, but it's easier than sit there and they had to, but they had to. Explain the 90% because pretty much everybody here had all these things. Everybody was shake up about fame. That is true that. And it's yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
And it's like everybody, there's 500 people in this building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're like this, you're like.
Yeah. Be respectful.
we have much more time than I anticipated.
I
Are we-
changed the clock.
Yes.
But I changed the clock.
Are we ready to proceed to closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I proceed, Your Honor, I would like to reserve up to not exceeding 5 minutes for my rebuttal. Alright, may it please the court. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Lights, camera, action. In today's case, we, the plaintiff, have to, by preponderance of the evidence, show that Danny Kosak is negligent and is liable in today's case. And in order to be able to do that, we had to prove negligence, which have 4 elements, 2 of which both parties have already agreed to. We have already agreed that the defendant owed a duty to the plaintiff. Members of the jury, we've already established that Danny Kosak owed the plaintiff, MTS, owed a duty to the plaintiff, which was to provide an animal that was adequately trained. Members of the jury, we're not disputing that. The other thing that we are not disputing is the fact that the plaintiff suffered harm. We've already established that Chris came on a past, and we're not arguing that. What we are looking at is the fact that the defendant breached their duty, as well as that because of that breach, the harm that was suffered by the plaintiff occurred. Members of the jury, we today as a prosecution have met our burden of proof and have been able to show you by preponderance of the evidence that this did in fact occur. Members of the jury, today we gave you the lights, which were the testimony by Ms. Alex Grace that she did everything she could and MTS did everything in their power in order to be able to provide a safe environment. Not only did they follow the rules that Danny Kosak gave them, but they went out of their way to not only speak to one expert, but 5. They spoke to 5 different experts and looked at the industry standards for having a live animal on set. Not only that, but we also gave you the cameras. That, members of the jury, was everything that Alex Grace and her staff did. They did safety checks, as well as posting signs. Signs that you heard from the defense were posted on the walls and in the doorways that led to the set. Everyone on set knew that there was a live animal. Everybody on set knew the guidelines, and everybody on set did everything that they could to adequately prepare for this. Unfortunately, members of the jury, it was the defense who gave you the tragedy. Danny Kosak did not give us a well-trained animal. In fact, you heard that on the stand. While Danny Kosak was on the stand, Danny Kosak told you that he only spent 8 hours training Elias for this trick. A trick that was new to Elias. A trick that needed a lot of time and attention. Considering the fact that this was the first time that Elias was going to be on MTS's studio, members of the jury, Danny Kosak told you that he didn't adequately train Elias. Not only that, but Danny Kosak also told you that the 150 hours that were used to train Elias at the stimuli were never verified by any experts in their field. In fact, he tried to tell you that he was an expert himself, but members of the jury, opposing counsel never was able to prove that Danny Kosak was an expert. Pursuant to 702, they did not meet all of the curriculum required for Danny Kosak to be an expert. But yet, Danny Kosak tried to sit up here and tell you that he was an expert. Members of the jury, just because Danny Kosak believes he's an expert doesn't mean that he has the scientific knowledge in order to do so. Danny Kosak failed to provide an adequately trained animal. Danny Kosak also failed to say if there were violations on the set. As an adequate trainer, Danny Kosak should have spoken up. But Danny Kosak told you that while he was on the set, he saw a violation and never did anything about it. Now, because this is a case where we're looking at preponderance of the evidence, we must simply show who was more negligent. Was it Danny Kosak for failing to train the chimp, or was it MTS? Members of the jury, you heard that MTS did everything that was possible for them to have the set adequately prepared for Danny Kosak's arrival. MTS told you of all the precautions that they took. Danny Kosak told you how he didn't adequately train the chimp. Members of the jury, you cannot put the blame on MTS. They had no control over how well the chimp was trained. They had no control over any of those aspects that had to do with the training of Elias because all of that fell onto Danny Kosak. Not only that, but today we We gave you evidence as to why Danny Kosak picking Elias was inadequate. Dr. Willoughby Hawkins came on stand and told you how the age was wrong. Elias had already entered puberty and was nearly done with it, which meant that Elias was more likely to attack. Elias was stronger. Elias's canines had grown in. Members of the jury, this is all risks that Danny Kosak chose to take. As an animal trainer, Danny Kosak knew how old Elias was, and Danny Kosak knew that this was a possibility. And Danny Kosak still chose to do so. But members of the jury, not only that, but Dr. Hawkins also told you how there had already been a previous act of aggression, and Danny Kosak should have taken that into consideration, and yet he didn't. There was one previous act of aggression with Danny Kosak and Elias on the set of the Byron Fellows show. Members of the jury, Danny Kosak chose to ignore that, and chose to continue to use Elias as a performance animal, even though he knew that that act of aggression had already occurred. And while Dr. Willoughby does admit that this was not to the magnitude of the attack that occurred, it should have been a sign that this was something that could happen. In fact, it did. On June 29, 2017, Danny Kosak's chimp Elias attacked and killed an innocent man. Members of the jury, I will come again and speak to you before the end of today's trial, and I will ask you to render a verdict for liable for Danny Kosak for his failure to provide an adequately trained chimp to MTS.
May it please the court. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, reaching for ratings. Midland's television studios, and especially the show Midland's After Dark with Alex Grace, was on the decline. You heard from the host of the show that the year of this attack was the lowest ratings that she had ever experienced. She was reaching for ratings, and that's why she asked my client, Danny Kosak, to come on the show with his chimpanzee Elias. And yes, it's true that Kosak may not have been doing well financially, so he took that opportunity so that he could raise more money to keep doing the good work of training and taking care of the animals at his sanctuary. Members of the jury, that's just business. That doesn't say that he was trying to foil the plans of this television studio and sabotage them. In fact, he wanted to make more money so he could continue to succeed and take care of these animals. If I wanted to continue to succeed, I wouldn't plan to have my animal attack a member of the Midlands Television Studios. That just doesn't make sense, members of the jury. But this is what the plaintiff wants you to believe about my client. So let's talk about the attack. June 29th, 2017. I agree, what happened to Chris Villafana was a terrible, terrible accident. But it could have been prevented. Danny Kosak trained Elias to avoid stimuli. But training doesn't always mean that something won't happen. And that's why he provided guidelines to Midlands Television Studios. He recognized that he could train Elias to avoid these stimuli, but if they weren't present at all, that would decrease the chance of anything happening. And Midlands Television Studios ignored that. Now, these guidelines were given to Midlands Television Studios for their safety, and they even got their own expert opinions and brought an own journal article for the industry standards, which I'll show you later. They couldn't even follow their own standards. So, Elias became agitated, and that's when Alex Grace reached towards Elias. And that's when Elias jumped and attacked Chris Villafana. This initial reach is what caused the attack. Now, as the defense, we have the burden of proof to prove to you through a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not, that Midlands Television Studio was negligent and liable for this case. We took a counterclaim to prove that, because we believe that Danny Kosak did everything in his power to make sure that this wasn't going to happen. And so we are using that to show that Midlands Television Studio is at fault because they were more negligent. We agreed that harms were suffered and damages were caused. We agreed that each side had a duty to the other to provide a safe working environment. Now I mentioned the preponderance of the evidence. So let's look at that evidence, members of the jury. The defense called 3 witnesses to the stand today. We first called Hunter Cooper, a person who was there on the set when the attack was happening. He had a personal account of what went on. He mentioned that Danny Kosak was agitated that this food was on set, explicitly against one of the guidelines, and Midland's television studios still chose to have food on set. Now, Danny was voicing his concerns here. We also saw that Hunter Cooper saw Alex Grace reach out towards Elias, causing Elias to jump and attack Chris Villafana. We then called Ashley Thornhill to the stand. Now, Ashley was a personal assistant to Grace. They were very close. They worked together. She said, I was never aware of any safety meeting to go over these guidelines. And yeah, Alex Grace said there was one. Members of the jury, if you work so closely with someone that you have to follow them around and do their bidding day by day, wouldn't you think you would have known about a meeting? She also said that the studio was a little disorganized leading up to the event. You know, she wasn't meant to make a sign, but she did. And lastly, we called Danny Kosak to the stand himself. He told you he has 15 years of animal training experience. He knows what he's doing. And yet the plaintiff has the audacity to say that Danny Kosak didn't know how to properly train his animal. 15 years, members of the jury. He said that he used positive reinforcement to train Elias, and widely accepted in the field as the best method of training an animal. Now, they'll say that he didn't switch to a fixed ratio in this circumstance, but must I remind you, he said he felt rushed. And in fact, he reached out to Midland's television studios saying, I don't feel confident that Elias will be ready. Yet, Midland's television studios still wanted Elias. He tried to do his part, but he was shut down by the plaintiff in today's case. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the industry standards that the plaintiff said they followed, and try to remind you, Alex Grace herself said, I made sure all of these guidelines were followed. Members of the jury, one of these guidelines is try to limit the number of people on set. You heard from AJ McLellan, the plaintiff's own witness, that Chris Villafana, an employee of Midland's television studios, who supposedly followed these guidelines, asked him to be on the set that day with Danny and Elias. Another one of these is to provide adequate notice to people on or near set. Now it says here, simply posting a sign on the studio doors that says, warning, live animal on set, should be the bare minimum necessary to provide notice. Now, the defense admits there was that exact sign on the door. You heard Ashley Thornhill, the person that made this sign and hung up the signs. She can't remember if she put them on all the doors. You even heard her say, no one checked to make sure that these were on all the doors. Members of the jury, Midland's television studios didn't check that the bare minimum was done correctly. Now, if the bare minimum isn't even done correctly, why should we assume that it's more likely that they did anything else? The bare minimum. The plaintiff was reaching for ratings. The ratings had dropped. And that is why they purposely had misused these guidelines and disrespected them, and were negligent and therefore liable for this attack. Members of the jury, I ask you that you find Midland's television studios liable in today's case.
Reaching for ratings or reaching for survival. Members of the jury, today you heard Alex Grace, you heard Danny Kosak tell you how he needed that performance. In fact, if you look at Exhibit 6, it specifically says that Danny Kosak had sent Alex Grace several messages throughout the year asking to be on the show. If you read a little bit further, you also see that it says that he needs this performance in order to save the animal sanctuary and save his own career. Members of the jury, Danny Kosak was reaching for survival at this point. You heard during his cross-examination that at the time he was operating the animal sanctuary at a deficit. In fact, if he didn't do anything to get more donors, he would be forced to shut down in a couple months. Members of the jury, the only person reaching here was Danny Kosak. Now, as an adequate trainer, Danny Kosak should have known that Elias wasn't ready. In fact, the defense told you that Danny Kosak felt like he wasn't. But yet, Danny Kosak still chose to go through with this. Members of the jury, that's negligence. Danny Kosak knowingly went on the show and did this performance, which resulted in the death of Crispy Fauna. Members of the jury, Danny Kosak knew that Elias wasn't ready, and instead of saying anything, he said quiet. He kept quiet because he needed this appearance. Now, they also tried to tell you that the warning fines were not enough. And they also tried to mix the evidence and make it seem like AJ McLellan was allowed on set. But just because there was a text message that invited AJ McLellan on set does not mean that he was actually there. In fact, you heard during his direct examination that he was not allowed on set because the guidelines prohibited him from being on set. Members of the jury, again, opposing counsel was trying to manipulate the evidence to fit what they need, to fit their burden. But you must look at all the evidence. We did everything we could. MTS did everything in their hands. They posted signs. They denied access to the set. There was no food on the set, which you heard from Hunter Cooper, the defense's own witness, who told you that the food was not on the set. Members of the jury, you also heard that from AJ McLellan. You heard that there was no food on set. MTS did everything they could in order to make sure that none of the violations occurred. Yet Danny Kosak, knowing that the chimp wasn't prepared, and feeling like he wasn't prepared to take the chimp on set, still chose to do so. And because of that, I ask that you find Danny Kosak liable in today's case. Your Honor, would you like us to step out so that you can finish balance?
Okay, yeah, that's Oh, my handwriting is terrible.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We can put one of the reference for calls and just take it back into this.
I almost just did this one all the way. You would have. Thank you, I'm glad that also.
Oh, you guys can sit down, we're done.
No. Not too much.
No, relax. It's all perfect.
Okay,
Where do you guys go to school?
we are Columbia College from Columbia, Missouri.
Okay.
We are Missouri Southern from Joplin.
Okay. Okay, I can go first. I think your comments are probably going to be more authoritative than mine, but let's see. Well, my name's Chase. I'm a second-year law student at Washburn. I competed in mock trial for 2 years in undergrad. I was a debate and forensics geek before that, and then I do trial competition and move forward at the law school level. So I'll just give some blanket general comments. Overall, one big thing is everybody needs to be off their notes. I really think that it's a crutch for the people who have them because you don't need them. Like watching you give the stuff you had, like when I saw you do your direct without your notes, I was so disappointed that I had seen notes before that because it was great. And so like you guys know the material, so don't be afraid to leave that crutch back at your desk and really have a little more faith in yourself that you can do it because you can. Don't be on notes. Listen to your objections. There's a lot of objections that were missed, a lot of leading questions. That whole Exhibit 23 guidelines thing, you guys were just straight up reading off of it without ever entering it into evidence. So really make sure you're paying attention to what's going on in the trial so that you're not missing a lot of the objections. And then when you do get the objection, listen to what the opposing counsel is arguing. Like if they make an objection to hearsay and they give and their response is an exception, don't restate just the definition of hearsay that this is an out-of-court statement because they're agreeing that it's an out-of-court statement, but there's an exception that applies. So listen and pay attention to what it is. And then the last thing I have is movement. There's a lot of pacing and kind of unintentional swaying, walking back and forth in a short area. Well, especially when you have all of this space to work with, really make deliberate movements. Stay in one spot. When you get to a new point, transition. So there's a lot of like ask a question, take a tiny little shuffle to the right, ask another question, take a tiny little shuffle back to the left. And those kinds of things are distracting, and it's way more persuasive if you limit your movement to when you're trying to make a transition, because it makes it more clear that you're moving on to a new point. But overall, just get off the notes, listen closely to objections and what it is people are saying in the round, and yeah, just work on making your movements more deliberate. But overall, good job.
My name's Erin. I'm a family law attorney here in Kansas City. So I never did the mock trial team, but I did like the trial advocacy, a couple semesters of that in law school here at UMKC. So I'm a partner in a small family law firm, and well, maybe some criminal defense too. But I don't do a lot of jury trials. I do a lot of judge or bench trials in my practice. So you want to go to court a lot, be a family law attorney. I can tell you that because we're in court all the time. If you want to do jury trials, do something, some other subset of law. But anyway, so I echo a lot of what you've already heard as far as the feedback. I totally am a believer in, you don't need the notes. You guys have done this. You know what your thing is about. And having done the trial ad 1 and trial ad 2, I've been there. I mean, you kind of like really hate your facts after a while because you've read them so much and that's how much you know them. So I like that. One of the things that I felt like was kind of abandoned a little bit was theme. I mean, we're not talking about like OJ, like the love don't fit, he wants to quit here, but I think it was a while before I heard lights, camera, tragedy again, and I would have liked to have heard that theme maybe developed a little bit more. I liked what you did with the reaching for ratings, not just kind of said at the beginning of your closing argument, but it was, now obviously in the middle of direct and cross-exam, you can't sit there and like do your look, they'll fit, whatever. But I like that you kind of spun that throughout. And on the flip side, I like that you tried to use their theme, a spin of their theme against them, in your rebuttal. So I would say that can be used very, very effectively, I think. So thank you. Besides the notes, this will come with time, but we're like staring at you. I get it. It's like very awkward because you have no idea who we are. But just maybe almost like trying it in front of a mirror or trying it for your neighbors or something, because the more comfortable that you come across, because you're not going to have met those jurors either. Except for one, you know them a little bit, but that just, it makes the jurors more comfortable with you. And so I would just that's just a practice thing. Practice makes perfect. And the more that you do that, the easier that will come. So moving about the well, there were 1 or 2 times where I really saw it used effectively. Hey, we're going to start with this topic, and I think you did it. We're going to walk over here, and then we're going to, go to this part of my closing argument, and then we're going to go back over here. Not so drastic to where that's distracting, but it helped me transition with what you were trying to say, just the fact that you were using that. So I would just say, keep doing this, you guys. This is great practice for whether you're going to do law school after this, or whether you're going to go into business, or anything. There are so many things, as you know, that you could do with your law degree, even if it's not in a courtroom. So, just keep doing it, keep practicing. Thanks for letting us judge you for a little while. So everybody seemed to know their parts very well, witness-wise. If you were like a real person, and I know how you were written, I would have wanted to punch you in the face like a real person, and you sold that. Because as it was developed, I'm like, oh, well, this Broadway actress and this, you were supposed to be all about you, and I think you sold that very, very well. I would have probably popped out a few more tears for the guy that died, but you played the self-centered character that you were supposed to play exactly right on. And how did you say all those words, by the way? That, when you were on the stand, what was that? That was, some of these words I didn't even know, but you weren't even, I don't know, you guys aren't young enough, or you're not old enough for this, but there was a show in the 60s, it was called Dragnet. It was terrible. It was the worst show that has ever been on television in life. And these people just had this dialogue and they talked so fast and they never mispronounced a word, they never stuttered, they never did anything. And so I used to make fun of that with my dad. I'm like, why don't they ever get anything wrong? And you never got anything wrong with all of your like expert testimony. And so, not that I'm saying you were bad like Dragnet, I'm just saying it was impressive that there were some of these words that I didn't even know what they were and you didn't even miss a beat. So, yeah, so that was impressive. That's all I have. Go eat, you guys.
Go eat, get lunch.
Thank you.